first official podcast session. Today we're actually going to be using a recording off of a phone. This didn't turn out exactly up to par as what I wanted, but in the future we're going to try to improve that for you folks. Audio equipment's a little tricky to format correctly, especially with guests remotely, but as I learn the process, I get better software. This will improve, and I just wanted to give you a heads up. But we have a great show for you today. Kevin's actually one of my good friends, and we love to discuss things like this. So I'm happy to be able to present this to you today, and I really do hope you enjoy.
I'd like to welcome you all to the World Networking Podcast. This is something new we're developing, and the Freaks Want to Play content creation. And I have a special guest today who's presenting some information on green development. And his name is Kevin Danaher. He's got over 40 years of experience in green development, and he's here to share with us today some of his background in that and his experience with this certain field of interest that has become way more prevalent in recent times. And Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to introduce myself. It's great to be on with you, Cam. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate having you here. And for those of you that don't know, my name is Cameron Scully. This is something new to me, and it's something I'm trying to work on to help expose people to the real world experience that's around us between networking with the community members that really should have more of a voice to others about their passions and their expertise, so we can all broaden our perspective in our society daily. So Kevin here, he has extensive background going for world traveling. Would you like to give any background on any of that?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I was one of the co-founders of Global Exchange back in the late 1980s, the Reagan era. Ooh, it was scary. And one of the first things we set up was called reality tours. And reality tours take Americans to various countries, China, Brazil, Mexico, Afghanistan, Iraq, and meet real people and get a sense of that society, the reality of that society for average people. And yeah, you know, you visit the sites and you go to the beach and that kind of stuff, but you have fun. But it's about learning about how we're all brothers and sisters. We have all these different cultures and languages, but underneath, we're all basically the same. And to live out that philosophy, that spirituality of we're all brothers and sisters, it helps if people can get together and party together. We've done literally hundreds of organized trips to Cuba. Here's a country that the U.S. government has a half a century violent campaign to overthrow the government of this little island with a population of Los Angeles County. Never attacked us or anything. We take people there to Cuba and they meet and they realize, hey, I like these people. They want to be friends with us. So let's get the governments out of the way. People-to-people diplomacy was the basic idea behind Global Exchange. But the reality tours are also a source of income to pay our staff who organize those tours. So there's a way to take enterprise and turn it from big corporations going around the world ravaging the planet to everyone having the freedom to be enterprising, right?
Absolutely.
Unleashing the creative potential of young people in particular.
Yeah, communication without borders is important. We shouldn't have restraint between our neighbors and even our neighbors abroad.
And now we have the internet capacity of creating global brain. If you look at all the different religions of the world, there's always some version of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And now we're at a point in our human development where we're learning to unpack the word others to mean all living things, not just all humans, but all living things. If sea turtles treated us the way we treat sea turtles, there'd be sea turtles running down the street slapping the hell out of us because we're destroying them. The fishing industry uses these fine mesh nets that catch the sea turtle and, end up killing them. There's a thing called the turtle excluder device that can be put in those nets, but it costs $400 or $500. The companies don't want to spend that money, so they continue to kill sea turtles. That's an animal that's been swimming the oceans for about 70 million years. It survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, and we're killing them because of a corporate practice to increase profits. And that's the danger, right? It's subordinating life to money.
It's absolutely alarming, and I think that it's something we all need to be aware of, because as consumers in a consumerist society, these things come from somewhere, and the way that we maintain our leverage on our resources is just as important as utilizing those resources towards economic development. So they really go hand in hand.
That education of the consumers of products, the technology exists right now that you could have a QR code on every product that when you shoot it with your handheld device, it gives you a video interview with the workers who made that product. That could be, right? There could be governments, national governments could start enforcing that, saying, it's just like fair trade. I was one of the co-founders of Fair Trade USA. When you see that fair trade label on a product, you know that the farmers got treated right. They got paid a good wage. They were encouraged to create co-ops and set up schools and clinics. And it was about pushing money down to the grassroots instead of up into the hands of the billionaires. So those changes are going on all around the world right now.
No, and those are great things to bring up. I actually had someone point out to me Tony's Chocolaroni. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's basically a company where they base their whole concept around imitating these bigger companies that produce chocolate, and they produce it at almost a slave labor rate, where they exchange the market at such a low price. These farmers come out almost net negative, and it doesn't utilize the local engagement enough, because they're not allowing enough expansion for these local people to have a stable living. So it's essentially robbing in the 21st century these people from an opportunity to have a chance to run their own business how they see fit. Instead, they're constrained to these economic standards that just don't qualify as equal.
Yeah, if you're buying chocolate that doesn't have a fair trade label on it, then there's probably child labor.
Absolutely.
In Ghana, places in West Africa, on the cacao plantations, there's child labor.
Have you ever personally experienced anything with the mining? Have you visited any mining sites in third world countries that produce some of these exports?
Dude, I've been down in a South African gold mine where you're about a mile deep down inside the earth. It's super hot, and the air is super saturated with moisture. It's like 99-point-something% humidity.
Wow.
What that means is the black workers were dying at a rate of one worker per shift was dying from heat exhaustion. This was back under apartheid. This was back in the 1980s, 1990s. Now, those conditions have changed. Those workers have much better conditions now. But back then, you could see right in front of your eyes what it would be like. And actually, there were two elevators. One was the white elevator that went down pretty fast. The black elevator just dropped, and your stomach comes right up into your throat. You think you're going to throw up. And when you see those kind of conditions, and then you see, a gold wedding ring being advertised on TV, and it's true love, and all of that horror is stripped out of the product. If we knew what goes into every product in terms of the human creativity, the human time and energy, we'd have a much different attitude about use it and throw it away. No, you can't use it and throw it away. There is no way. We live on a small planet, right? So what's going to happen is recycling and upcycling, taking things out of the waste stream and making use of them. That technology is going to expand rapidly. There's so many companies right now that are focused on that, getting plastic out of the ocean, turning plastic into useful things like park benches or planking for decks or what have you. So that green economy is going to keep going. It's going to keep exploding. There's almost like an inverse relationship between climate chaos gets worse and more evident, and the need to deal with drought and floods and melting ice caps. When all the ice on the planet melts, it raises ocean levels over 200 feet. So the state of Florida, Miami, Houston, New Orleans, all these coastal cities, what happens when they go underwater? What about the mass migration of people inland and upland?
Yeah,
that's going to take place.
And we've seen a lot of this even this year in America through just the West Coast. And I'm more familiar with what's going on with the West Coast and the coastline itself actually being eroded from some of these 30-foot waves. I mean, it's a very real potential to occur. And I mean, we've seen proof that sea levels are rising. I mean, even from ancient history, from the Hellenic era, the terrain has changed drastically. I mean, certain areas are just underwater now at this point.
Yeah, so something listeners should check out is a glacier called Thwaites Glacier. It's Thwaites, Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. It's the size of Florida. And most of it is up on rock, but there's a big piece that hangs over, a lip that hangs over into the ocean. The ocean water is getting warmer, and it's undermining that piece in the ocean, and it could tip the rest of it into the ocean. It's the size of Florida. It alone, that one glacier alone, and there are others in Antarctica, that one alone would raise ocean levels between 9 and 10 feet, right? Which you're talking Miami Beach is gone, Houston, all the oil, petroleum in Louisiana along the Mississippi River, all that stuff goes underwater. So you're talking trillions of dollars of damage, right? So we're headed for some really rough weather, and we need to figure out how to strengthen our boat, our ark, so that we can get through. And if you look, there's an explosion on YouTube of permaculture, living off the land, growing your own food, building with natural materials, being self-sufficient, because people see what's coming.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'd have to agree. And turning from that point, I think what are some of the developments that you've seen personally? I know that talking to you in the past, we've talked about someone producing products from worm poop to help lessen the load on carbon emissions. Yeah.
It's amazing how much science now has gone into the functioning of agriculture below the surface, the soil science. We now know that if you take care of your soil, you'll have good products. The nutrition of current vegetables, the current carrot out of industrial farming, has less nutrition than 80 years ago when Grandma was growing it in the side yard. My mom always had a garden in the side yard. So because industrial agriculture has been degrading the quality of the soil, people are getting more into permaculture, using worms to create fertile soil, planting plants in clusters where there's a family of plants that are going to, you've got a tall tree, you've got a shorter tree, a bush, ground vines, ground plants, where the science of those different plants shows that they help each other. So it's not the industrial agriculture where you got miles and miles of corn, miles and miles of wheat. Monoculture is against nature. Nature doesn't do monoculture. The only way you can get a field to grow just corn or just wheat is lots of chemicals thrown on it, because it's vulnerable to bugs. If you have a diverse forest, I'm lucky. I live in a forest with lots of different kinds of trees and bushes and all this stuff going on. Monoculture is destroying the quality of our soil. It's degrading the quality of our soil. So there's a transition going on to what's called regenerative agriculture, where you're working the land in a way that you're making it more fertile, not less fertile. You're thinking 7 generations down the road, my great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, will they be able to farm this land successfully? And with that perspective, you become a good ancestor. We think of ancestors as people who came before us, but we're going to be ancestors for future generations. Do we want to hand them a burnt cinder of a planet with climate chaos? No, we don't want to do that. So everybody's waking up. We got to stop burning fossil fuels. We got to get much more aware of how we run our economy. The economy has to subordinate money to life instead of subordinating life to money. You can either have money values rule over the life cycle, or you can have life values, human rights, nature rights, over the money cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that actually leads into one of the points I wanted to touch on, which you've already dug into a little, about the regenerative agriculture versus monocrop agriculture. In that context, what tips would you have for any farming enthusiasts starting out in the cooler weather, especially in the higher altitudes? I know where you're at, it's kind of a mid-level, not too high, but you do have a winter season that ends up fluctuating. So what's something that you found that has been successful on your property?
Well, if you look at what just happened with these big storms, the lower levels down in the Central Valley got flooded. The upper levels at 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet, they got 15 feet of snow. We're at 3,400. And it was no big deal. You get a little bit of snow, a little bit of rain, not a problem. When you're looking to buy land, and this is what I would recommend for people, is try to secure yourself the ownership of some property. You want to make sure that there's an easy access to water, because without water, you can't do anything.
Absolutely.
So here in Quincy, California, at 3,400 feet, we're in a drainage of the Feather River watershed, the largest contributor of water to California's water system of any watershed in the state. Nobody knows about the Feather River watershed. And Plumas County is very unique in that the county boundary is written around the 3 branches of the Feather River. It was brilliant, whoever did the original mapping. So we have 3 major catchment areas, the Lakes District, Sierra Valley, and Mount Lassen, are all above us. We're below them in the drainage system. So this area will always have water, and that's why I bought the property that I bought. And also, you want to try and get something that's south-facing. My entire hill faces south, so the snow melts really fast, And that tells you your growing potential is going to be good, because even in winter, you're getting sun directly on your hill. So a lot of it is about think long term in terms of the property. You can improve the fertility of existing soil. That's relatively easy to do. But if you don't have access to water, or if your property doesn't get enough sun, then that's an issue. What's nice here is we also get wind. The wind energy potential in this valley is huge because we're at 3,400 feet. The Central Valley heats up during the day, gets up to 100 degrees a lot of the time in the Central Valley. That warm air comes up the Feather River Canyon, and it hits this valley, which, eventually people should know that the Federal Energy Department has a program called Wind for Schools. It's a wind energy program where they finance it. They come to your school. It's for rural schools, and they'll set up the wind energy and educate the kids about wind energy at the same time. And wind energy technician is one of the fastest growing job categories in the country. It's exploding.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that, but it makes total sense. I from my experience, because I've looked a little bit into solar and I've had some discussions with some people about solar's potential. It seems like solar is more destructive at this point than productive, because of how much maintenance and how much waste comes from solar. So, in your opinion, would you say that wind energy is potentially a better source?
Well, it's the first thing to take into consideration with renewable energy is scale. If you're talking about massive arrays of solar panels or huge wind energy farms, you're talking either big government or big corporation. I'm in favor of smaller, localized microgrids where you're using more human-scale solar and wind, and even mini hydro. Here in Quincy, there's a small hydro plant on the Gansner property that provided the first electricity for the town, and that hydro unit is still generating electricity to this day. So it's very much a crucial factor to look at the scale. Big stuff is going to be controlled by big corporations or the government. Smaller scale stuff can be controlled at the community level. But you also got to look at, there's a lot of research going on into wave energy and tidal energy. The waves and the tides, those are constant. They don't stop. They're not like solar or wind that are intermittent. And also you got a lot of battery technology going on. And what's going to happen is there's going to be more and more push in the economy and politically to get energy without fire, to get energy without burning things. Because when you burn things, this has been going on for thousands of years. It started with wood, peat, and then coal and oil and gas. We got to stop burning things. We have to reinvent. If you combine wave energy, tidal energy, wind energy, solar energy, geothermal, mini hydro, there's all sorts of stuff. There's eco-gym technology where stationary bikes and rowing machines and other workout equipment are generating electricity. Anything that moves can generate electricity. So there's going to be a lot of sort of path-breaking energy technology. It's not the technology that's going to save us. It's us getting organized so it's controlled by we the people.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And I think tidal is a good way to go, especially with just the weather patterns that we've been having. The potential to channel some of that stuff in a fresh format, it's definitely there, and we definitely have the technology to utilize that kind of environment.
Yeah.
So I think you're onto something with that. Solid state batteries have been a really good potential solution too, that I've been kind of reading up on. they're uh, they're really environmentally stable. So you're able to put them in hot and really cold areas. So that's definitely a plus. Um, because a lot of it is energy storage. I know that that's been a problem in the past. Is how do we actually stably store things? Because lithium batteries and these highly toxic solutions are they're not long term ultimately.
Yeah.
So we have to utilize everything that we have on our planet to find better and more efficient patterns of engagement when it comes to transitioning that electrical. And especially when it's local, you don't want to transition energy from the coast all the way up to the mountains if that's a huge trek and it doesn't make sense to be doing that kind of transition when it could be more locally sourced. But
Yeah.
awareness has a lot to do with that, and people just rely on these corporations to keep the power going when in reality, they need us. They need workers. They need people to facilitate what their design is. So if their design is flawed from the get go, we're just producing more pollution at the end of the day by helping these institutes try to push their narrative. And right now, like in some regions of the country in some regions of the world, that unfortunately there's just not enough resource for them to be capable of making that happen on their own. But if we organized ourselves and we actually came together on a project, this is where these potentials become a solution.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's where nuclear has a lot of potential as well, because
I'm pushing the term solutionaries. We should all become solutionaries. Let's fix this stuff that's wrong.
absolutely, absolutely, and I'd like to consider myself a solutionary because I think that's a great statement to put out. People need to have this solutionary mindset that, hey, what am I doing if I really care about the environment, if I really care about my neighbor, if I really care about these generations that are coming, um, where do I belong in the society in this day and age when productivity and exportation is constantly energy rich. It's constantly demanding. So it's not necessarily going to stop for any one of us.
Yeah.
We need to work around it and actually produce stuff from, like you were saying, grassroots movements. And a lot of this has to come with education, and a lot of that comes from the field. I think getting more hands on with people that have been in that experience and are willing to share that is important. And that's part of the whole founding of this podcast, is to help people leverage that understanding just a little bit better so they can maybe be inspired to even just do self research, self dedication, self reflection. Because I know that's something I need to work on, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's very hard to keep up with today's society, but if we work together and we all take a piece of the pie, that doesn't become so daunting.
Yeah. That's what organization is for. You have to create organizational structures that can link people in ways that they help each other out.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to touch back on one thing since we're talking about energy here. Um, what are your thoughts on clean nuclear? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that are still weary about that technology. Um, but from what I've gathered, especially with the developments in fusion, I think I think we have a really good potential to have a really good source based off of that.
Yeah, well, the problem with nuclear is that what killed nuclear was capitalism. It's not profitable. Nuclear wouldn't exist if it wasn't for government subsidies to big corporations. The
Yeah,
problem nuclear too is water. It uses a huge amount of water, and you've already had nuclear power plants that are shut down because the water was too warm to provide any kind of cooling effect. And water levels on lakes or rivers have dropped below intake levels to the nuclear power plant, and they shut down. Draining local aquifers so that people's homes don't have water, but the nuclear power plant has water. And, fusion is going to be decades. It's one of those things. It's always going to be decades in the future. The amount of money to make it work requires either big corporations or big government. It's not an average people can get a handle on.
Oh, absolutely. That's something definitely that's more organized around a financial gap, because obviously we're not all nuclear scientists out here.
There's a real danger of people getting a sort of techno-utopian, your technology is going to fix everything, artificial intelligence will do all our work for us. It all depends on who controls the technology to do what. If they're controlling it to make money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think something with it too is I have a question for you actually, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but with desalination technology being a thing, I guess with erosion, it's not smart to have any nuclear on the coastlines, and that's kind of something we've gathered from even Japan's accident, and different events where tides come in and facilities are flooded. But would it make more sense to move in a direction where desalination is where they gather the water from?
Well, there's desalination going on in Saudi Arabia. There's a bunch of companies down in Southern California do desalination. And actually, they're finding lithium in ocean water. The issue I have with desalination is that you end up with this brine, this heavy-duty gunk with lots of salts in it. If you just dump that back in the ocean, you're going to really screw up that ocean habitat. So,
that's true.
Again, it's a lot about who's regulating these companies and, what are they doing? There's an issue down in Arizona of a company from Saudi Arabia. It is got huge property where they're producing alfalfa. It's a very thirsty crop. It uses lots of water. They're drilling out water. They're using Colorado River water and artesian well water, water that took thousands of years to accumulate in the aquifer. And they're using it to grow this alfalfa to send back to Saudi Arabia to feed their dairy cows. You shouldn't be raising dairy cows in Saudi Arabia. Actually, it's against Saudi law to grow alfalfa because it's such a water-intensive crop. So we're at a point now where you can have foreign companies coming into the United States, tapping out groundwater aquifer to ship abroad. This is global capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Where it used to be us doing that to other countries, now other countries can start doing it to us, exploiting our resources. So that's why the World Trade Organization, it's why I did a book on the World Trade Organization. It's based in Geneva, Switzerland. They are writing a constitution for the global economy, and it's only corporations are at the table. It's not you and I. It's not farmers. It's not carpenters, truck drivers, nurses. It's the big shots at the table making the rules so that transnational corporations can more easily compete with mom and pop operations at the local level and extract wealth. Walmart does not build a Walmart in your county expecting to leave more wealth behind than it takes out. They want to extract wealth from your county. So, we got to change those rules. Capitalism has to change in that regard. Global capitalism is creating more inequality and more environmental destruction, and that's got to stop.
I agree. No, I agree. And I think that's a direction that we need to be headed in. Especially in mindset. And I have an app actually that was mentioned to me just this week, and it's HDFFA Get a Taste, and it provides local food in Central Oregon at the moment, where people can actually base their purchases for their food based off of their local county. And that's something a lot of people have been utilizing up there that they found to be really successful. And this is the future. I think people need to get in the mindset, especially if they're trying to start entrepreneurship, to expand into the local mindset. What did the local consumers need that they don't have, or that they could use better, that takes less carbon emissions to produce? If it can be produced locally, it should be produced locally if it's a necessity. So, and food's a necessity. I mean, we all need food. We all need water. So these things are very important to all of us. Whether or not people agree on that, I don't see why you wouldn't. I think this is a very important discussion we all need to be having, um, when it comes to our supply chains, because I think we've all noticed since COVID, supply chains are a mess. The distribution network's a mess. And the people actually serving these distribution centers, they're not being treated fairly. I mean, they're being overworked in some places, and it's it's not a long-term solution. It really I mean, of course, some things, and this goes back to ancient history. There's always been a Silk Road of sorts. There's always been a trade network, and that's important. But when it's extracting all the time, it's 90% extraction. You have to wonder what's being left behind.
Yeah.
And that's exactly like what you're mentioning with desalination, with the brine. That's something I tend to forget, actually, because I know I've heard that before, but again, some of these things slip our minds because that's not the talk at hand all the time. People want to push for electric vehicles, but they don't want to talk about the pollution that's going to emit from the batteries and the different components that have to be extracted and disposed. So we need to find something, maybe even hydrogen based, that can help with clearing up that deficit of pollution between putting back, like providing back to the natural ecosystem. And that has to do a lot with soil science too. Like we want our soil to be good and fertile and able to be grown in, not just always extracted. So if you look at nature's lesson there, I feel like you can learn a lot from just looking at that. The nature operates off of diversity.
Yeah. Unity of diversity. Yeah, and that extractive model, you can see it here where I'm living in Plumas County, California. It's a huge county. It's bigger than Yosemite, bigger than Yellowstone, with more animal species, more mammal species, more nesting bird species, more plant species, and only 20,000 people. But the history of it, gold was extracted, timber extracted, water extracted, electricity from the water, from dams, extracted. So you have poverty in a county that's incredibly wealthy. There shouldn't be any poverty in this county, but it's because the economic model historically was extractive. What's going on now is we're making a transition to an economy based more on recreation, second homes, getting out in nature, mountain biking, hiking, the rivers and lakes. More and more people are going to move uphill as coastal properties and low-lying land floods. People will move uphill. We just got to get ready for that.
Absolutely. And I think to touch on that, the sad truth with all this stuff is the students really pay for it, because when it's just an extraction model and They're ignoring bringing up these new generations and educating them properly. They're losing out on potential workers. I mean, it's not like it's benefiting these corporations to be ignoring populations and ignoring local economies. It's something they need to start realizing too, that this is destructive. This is destructive to the culture, especially in America. I mean, we've been at each other's throats on social media lately, and especially with politics. And when that kind of stuff becomes the main discussion, we lose out on what's really happening in the background, which is especially a lack of drive for education. And I've seen that with some people I've talked to. People are scared to get into college because they don't want to be in debt, and rightly so. But this is something that if companies were more willing to expand into green technologies and green research, they would find more retention with workers. At least in my opinion, I feel like that's absolutely something that people would respect more and be willing to work with them more.
Yeah, there's actually pretty good data on companies that treat their workers with respect and pay them well, and have good benefits packages, are often more profitable. But, the problem with the system is it automatically, sort of in its DNA, it concentrates wealth. If you and I sit down to play poker and you got $10 and I have $10 million, I'm going to end up with your $10. It's an unfair fight, right? So that's built into capitalism as it stands. You have to get control of the political process to change the rules to tax the wealthy. People are saying, look, you got these billionaires who aren't paying taxes because they have a team of lawyers who can work the tax code enough that they end up paying less than their secretaries. Look, Trump had a year where he paid no taxes. He had 1 year where he paid $750. It's a joke.
It is a joke.
So, until the rules get changed, I taught my daughters how to play Monopoly. When they were young, I said, look, every time you land on a property, you buy it. Pretty soon other people are landing on your property paying you money for rent. It's pretty simple. And then the game ends when one person has everything and everybody else is wiped out. Is that the kind of society we want to live in, where there's a few who have everything and everybody else is struggling? In the capital city of California, the richest state in the richest country, there's thousands of homeless people. If that's not a failure, if you in your personal job performance failed that bad, you'd be fired, right? But
Yep.
The system can't be fired. It has to be changed from the bottom up. And that's where I find encouragement, that if you look at the younger generation, they're out there fighting for climate measures. They're anti-racist. They don't care whether you're gay or what race you are. That's very cool development, because they're waking up to the fact that they're going to see some climate chaos that we can't even imagine.
Well, and that's a lot of what we've talked about in our own personal discussions with you explaining this is more of a function fitting the form, an old form that's lacked modern technology in institutionalizing some of our policies, especially when it comes to economic trade. Hence the extraction models, because that comes from back in the day when people would mine. A lot of extraction. But now it's getting to the point where we really do need to address that form needs to fit function, not function fitting this old broken form. The system does need reworked.
Yeah, it's like if you look at the education system, get up early, go in, the bell rings, you move, sit in rows, shut up, listen to the person in front. That's a 19th century industrial model that was set up to train people to work in an assembly line factory kind of structure. Now, What we need is imagination, not rote memorization of details, but imagination. Einstein had a great saying. He said, imagination is more important than knowledge, because we're going to be confronting some serious changes here on a planetary level, and it's going to require a lot of creativity and imagination to deal with this, and a lot of resilience skills. There's a fund, the Rockefeller Foundation funded a program where cities around the world, a whole bunch of cities, got $10 million each to hire chief resilience officers. San Francisco got one, Oakland, LA, a whole bunch of cities around the world. And the chief resilience officers to figure out, okay, given what we know about climate chaos that's coming, what do we need to do in terms of green infrastructure, preparation, seawalls, right? I was pitching an idea with a buddy of mine for eco-levees. You build large mounds of rammed earth along the coast where you got saltwater tolerant plants on the ocean side, big parks with trees and picnic tables and stuff on the flat top, and on the inland side, terraced urban agriculture. That technology exists. That could be done. You throw enough money at that, you can build those eco-levees. But it's a question of political will. People that control the funding, the Biden administration just got passed, they passed the bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. Over $350 billion are going into green technology. $350 billion, that's a pretty significant chunk. So that's going to accelerate innovations around wind energy and solar energy and water conservation. Here in California, they're starting to put solar panels above the canals, the water canals, the Central Valley Water Project canals. So you're not only generating electricity with the solar panels, you're protecting the water from the sun's rays that cause evaporation of the water. So you're conserving water. All sorts of stuff like that is going on, and it's going to get accelerated by over $350 billion of federal funding.
And that's a good use of solar right there. Even though it has its flaws, I mean that's using it in a context where it has more potential to do good than bad. In
any place where you can make money by providing energy or food or whatever in a cheaper way without harming the environment, I think we're at a tipping point where you're starting to see companies that can make more money healing nature than hurting nature. And that's a tipping point, right? When you can start making money by taking things out of the garbage and making something useful, or preventing the garbage in the first place. In San Francisco, when I worked at the Department of Environment, it was law, it was city law that everybody, every company, and every home had to separate their trash into 3 bins: black for landfill, blue for recycling, paper, cans, bottles, and green for compost, kitchen scraps, yard clippings, all that kind of stuff. That green bin gets all collected and taken out to a facility in the Central Valley where they make soil, and the soil gets sold. They make about 10 different kinds of soil for golf courses, vegetable gardens, different uses, and it's a business. They make money from that trash. So that kind of thing is going to intensify and increase as all the hurricanes and tornadoes and storms and all make us aware of what's coming.
Absolutely. No, and that's something social media is beneficial with, is it's exposing these people to more of these things that are happening, which it provides a level of accountability. Even if people bicker and disagree, there's still this level of accountability that, hey, this is visually being captured. This is something that's pressing right now that we should all be aware of. And that's the perks of the day, the age we live in, is the networking. and that's something we all should be practicing in some form. I mean, it's like having a good set of friends. You know, when you're feeling depressed or you're feeling down, you're feeling uninspired. It's proven to help have conversations with people. That verbal interaction, just the brainstorming process itself is very healthy to be a part of. And
funny you mention that, because I'm just reading this book, Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends, by Marissa Franco, PhD. And she goes into great detail, all these studies that show the simple fact is that we are social animals like wolves or bees. We exist in relationship to other humans. And the worst thing that can happen to you is isolation. What's the punishment in prison for the really tough characters? Oh, we're going to put you in isolation. It's torture, right?
It is.
It's not going to make that guy any nicer. That's for sure. It's going to screw him up. But we're now able to scientifically show that kindness and generosity of spirit and being gracious and being thankful and being nice, like Mommy taught us when we were 2 years old, be nice, share your toys, don't fight, that all of that stuff is good for you as an individual. It improves your own chemistry. So the golden rule, do unto others, makes sense scientifically.
Precisely.
Because you're going to benefit.
Totally. No, I see the total context there with this, because it's very true. I mean, even in the service industry, you get better service if you treat the service staff better. We're back with Kevin. We had to record 2 sessions here, so we're going to go ahead and continue on with our session. So, Kevin, where do you see green technology heading? Do you see it at a good place or a bad place in its current development?
Well, if you track it over time, whether it's solar, wind, geothermal, wave energy, tidal power, they're all accelerating very rapidly because the evidence on climate chaos is mounting. You're having these massive weather disasters like we just had in California in late 2022 and early 2023, where we had these massive storms come in and dump huge amounts of water, atmospheric river, and people weren't ready for it. So places got flooded, trees were down from the wind, and the insurance company costs are mounting up into the hundreds of billions of dollars every year. The number of multi-billion-dollar weather events is increasing. And what that does is it tells the business community that investing in producing energy without fossil fuels and developing green building technology and green infrastructure that can deal with severe weather, all of that is going to increase. And in fact, when you look at the data, there's a sharp rise. It's like a ski slope kind of rise in the investment money that's going into green technology. Now, that doesn't mean that we're in the clear or we don't have to worry about climate chaos, but markets respond to opportunities. And when governments, the U.S. government just put almost $400 billion into building up green technology, solar energy, wind energy, et cetera. So you can assume that as climate chaos gets worse and there's more damage from extreme weather, you're going to see more money get invested in green technology. There's a lot of money being put into getting plastic out of the ocean. They're developing bacteria that can eat plastic. All sorts of ways in which people are waking up. The scientific community, you're seeing a lot of scientists now do direct action protests where they chain themselves to doors because the climate scientists understand how severe this is. And if we hit tipping points where Antarctica starts to drop glaciers into the ocean, coastal cities like Miami and Houston and New Orleans, they're doomed. So the amount of money at stake and the amount of dislocation of human population is huge. And as that science builds up, you're going to see more and more money get invested into green technology.
Yeah, I think, well, since we last actually talked in the first half of this podcast, I did a little research myself. I've had some conversations with people because I like to get a well-rounded perspective of the situation. And I think right now, for the average person, grassroots, homesteading is really the best thing we can look forward to on the individual level, because the more we're able to self-sustain.
You'll see more and more videos on YouTube and TikTok about how to grow your own food, how to build your own housing, how to, take care of yourself in the local economy and not be dependent on stuff that's coming from far away.
And innately that just means we're leaving less of a carbon footprint, because we're able to sustain more on the local level, less distribution costs, less infrastructure costs, less energy stress, ideally.
Yeah.
So no, it's definitely, and that goes with saying the ocean. I definitely feel like, depending on how weather goes, because there's a possibility we could hit an ice age. I've been considering that, to where it could fluctuate, and that's from my experience with geology as well, is looking at the patterns. We don't really know right now. Right now is a weird period. Historically it really is. It's been stably rising, but we don't really know what comes after the rise. History tells us there's a fall in temperature. So it really comes down to how long, how much of a fall, where. There's different regions, there's different uneven climates. It's going to be uneven, and regardless of what anyone thinks, I think we can all agree that it's unstable. It's unstable. We don't necessarily control that fluctuation. Now, there's the whole debate of cloud seeding and all that. I do think there is some tampering people have done personally with cloud seeding that has affected weather patterns. So there's that to be affected in the debate. There's a lot to it, but when it gets down to the individual, understanding pollution, I think, is the best way to be informed, because we all do produce pollutants in some form. So the less toxic those pollutants are, ideally the better we have a chance of keeping our nature at a healthy level to be able to produce.
Yeah, we just have to be careful that there was a very intense corporate campaign by the fossil fuel companies around carbon footprint, your carbon footprint, like blaming it on the individual person, the individual consumer, instead of the companies that were burning petroleum and burning coal and burning gas and shipping all this stuff all around the planet, causing all this buildup of carbon dioxide in the environment. They want to shift responsibility onto you, the person, just like with those chasing arrows in a circle that led everybody to believe that the product it was stamped on was recyclable. Not necessarily so. Yeah. They used that symbol to make people think it was recyclable or recycled when in fact it wasn't. So we have to be on guard for corporate confusion, corporate camouflage.
No, that's a really good point to bring up. Absolutely. And that's psychology. It's a play on psychology. People, they definitely know how people interact. And when you're at that scale of production, you definitely have the chance to experiment with diverse groups, and not just get one controlled group. You're getting more of a general financial feedback as well. So it's not just psychological at the end of the day. If people keep supporting it because they think it's doing good versus doing bad, people want to, I think in most cases, do good for the environment rather than do bad And if they had
Sure.
the choice, they'd rather do good.
For sure, yeah.
So, no, that's definitely it's a good perspective to keep in mind right there. And on that point, let's see. What's one of the most beneficial projects you've worked on your homestead?
Well, what I'm doing is a hillside, and it's a hillside that faces south. It's heavily wooded, really thick forest. It hadn't burned it's never really burned in recent human history because it's right near town. So fires near this hill were always put out really quick. And what happened was you got really thick tree cover. So what I'm doing is I'm thinning it out. I'm taking out the dead trees. I'm taking out the smaller trees. I'm taking out the less valuable trees to put it back. If you go back 100, 150 years and you look at the photos of the Sierra forests in California, the trees were big and they were very far apart because there was regular fire. Fire is a natural part of these mountains, usually historically from lightning, but then when humans came along, Native Americans were managing fire and using it as a tool. The white man came along and said, no, fire is bad, it's dangerous, we got to stop it immediately. And that was the official policy of the U.S. government, to put the fire out as quickly as possible. And what you got then was a buildup of really heavy, thick fuel loads in these mountains, so that then when you get a fire, it really takes off and you get these mega fires like the Dixie Fire that we had 2 years ago here in Plumas County. It burned almost 1 million acres, one fire. So it turns out when you look at the data, human-caused fires cause a lot more damage than lightning-caused fires, the usual natural way of getting forest fires. So we've learned from that, and now I'm very active in the fire safe movement here. We have a very active fire safe council. We've got about 20 fire safe groups around the county doing all sorts of education, helping people clear their properties of unnecessary buildup of fuel. And with that education, people are realizing that the Native Americans were right. You're supposed to use fire as a tool, not have it be used against you by letting fuel build up. So right now, for example, here in Quincy, to the south of town, there's over 30,000 acres that's being scoped for treatment. It's already started. Areas are being thinned out, and the wood is being taken out and either, pulped or chipped or burned. And on the north side of town, there's about 90,000 acres that's also being treated. And a lot of money, federal and state money, is being put into wildfire management. And the local college, which previously, it's a 2-year college, it had associate degrees, the 2-year colleges, but they had a bachelor's degree in equine and ranch management, horse development and ranch management. There's a new bachelor's degree now in wildfire and forest management. So that's going to create a whole new crop of young people who understand the science of fire management, how we can use it as a tool instead of it using us in a disastrous way.
Absolutely. Really. No, absolutely. And on that point, the aquifers have a lot to do with keeping fire in a safe manner. Like at least controlled, which has a lot to do with California right now because of the droughts that we've been experiencing in previous years. And
people are using the term aridification, like long-term drying out. It's not just drought, because drought was always conceived as a temporary thing. It'll be around for a year or two and then it goes away. This is aridification. It's a long-term decline in the amount of moisture landing. One of the good things about Plumas County is we're in a drainage, and the people Plumas County used to be part of Butte County, and the people who carved away Plumas County as a separate county were smart enough to draw the boundaries around the 3 branches of the Feather River. There's very few counties in the United States where the boundary of the county encompasses an entire river system. So it was pretty brilliant the way they did the boundary of the county. So living in a drainage, midway in a drainage, not at the bottom where the flooding happens or at the top where you get 15 feet of snow, but in the middle where you get a little bit of snow, but you get the benefit of all that snow that's up above you melting and coming down through your river system. It's a good location.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's definitely important to have a water source that's in control of the local populace. At least you're able to interact with it locally on a business level, because that's something we need to all consider when we go to an area is our water sources. You don't want to be drinking something off of a factory, off of a plant. No one wants to be susceptible to that problem. But
more and more people now are getting hip to permaculture, and one of the things that's taught in permaculture is when you have a slope, you want to cut across, you want to create swales, curved trails across that slope to slow the water down. When I first bought my property, there was a big storm, and before I had bought it, I see brown water running out into the street off the hill. Well, that's soil being washed away. So one of the first things I did was start creating check dams in the two stream beds to slow that water down and cutting swale trails across the contour of the hill so that water will go into the soil and sink into the roots of the trees. That's where you want the water. You don't want it running off. You want it in the soil.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was going to touch on with you, because I know that's done a lot of good for your property, and it's put a lot back into the aquifers rather than exporting it.
Yeah, when I look at pictures of other forests, I can't help but comparing and saying my forest looks better than that.
Well, sure, water is the bringer of life. We all require water in nature. So the more you can control that, and the more you can have a stable environment for your growth, the more benefits I think you'll naturally see, which is great. This is something I think a lot of people can learn from. So I appreciate you sharing that. So because you've traveled internationally, I'd like to ask you, where are the best areas in the world to learn green development techniques from? Like which part of the world have been making the greatest moves into this conversation on homesteading innovations?
Well, I'm happy to say that Northern California, the West Coast, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, there's a lot because of heavily forested mountains with really good water resources. The weather comes in off the Pacific Ocean. It drops its water as clouds rise in altitude. They tend to drop their water either as rain or snow.
Sure.
So these mountainous forested mountains on the West Coast have created a human culture of understanding we need to protect these forests. We need to protect these mountains. If you look at the development of direct action, where people would chain themselves to trees to keep them from being cut down when they were doing clear cutting, a really stupid policy of just, killing all the trees on the side of a mountain for hundreds of acres. Well, it turns out that that's a really stupid thing to do, and we know that now. So now even the private companies here are doing more selective logging. The problem is it's more profitable to just go in if your only goal is to make money and you don't care about the long-term health of that forest. You just go in and cut them all down and turn it into money. And that's one of the essential problems of the capitalist economy. It's about turn nature and turn human creativity into money. And if you do that, if you constantly do that, you're going to destroy the natural resource base. You're going to create a lot of poverty and misery because your only goal is money, and it's a quantitative measure. There's no qualitative measure in it in terms of, are people happy? Here in Sacramento, the capital city of the richest state in the richest country on the planet, we have thousands of homeless people living out on the street in pup tents. That's a sign of a failure of an economic system. So, the natural bounty of the West Coast mountains has caused a big jump in people doing permaculture, people doing how do we live off the land in a way that is regenerative and makes the soil more productive, not less productive. If you look at the big corn and wheat and soy fields in the Midwest, they're using chemicals and heavy machinery that's depleting the nutritional value of the soil. It's sucking nutrition out of the soil. We lose about 2 billion tons of topsoil a year to wind and rain erosion because of this chemical-intensive and machine-intensive monocropping. And we're realizing you can't do that forever. The Midwest of the U.S. was blessed with very thick topsoil because there were millions and millions of bison roaming around for centuries. The Native Americans didn't kill them all. That's what the white man did when he came in. In fact, the federal government had policies to encourage people, $5 per buffalo, cut off the ears and we'll pay you for it. And they massacred millions of bison. So we're learning from our history that, we screwed up. Let's do it a more intelligent way. And we're learning from the indigenous people who lived for thousands of years without screwing it up. And that's being incorporated into modern science in a way that allows us to live more sustainably on the land. People thinking, where are my great-great-great-great-grandchildren 100 years down the road, 500 years down the road? Are they going to be able to sustain themselves on this land? And that consciousness is what's going to save us.
Yeah, the collective thought. That's precisely right.
Yeah.
I think that something that we all need to work on is our communication as a community. Bring things more localized, because localization creates trust, and we're able to trust our neighbor. We're able to trust in the projects that are happening in that community, which goes back to a smaller scale than, say, a national scale, waiting on the government to necessarily start projects that you locally could maybe drive towards. And even if that means privatization, you're bringing it out in a format that everyone can be involved. And that's good, ultimately. That's a good thing.
You hit on a key word, community. Community. It takes people working together and not getting distracted by stupid arguments in Washington. Most of the solutions are going to come from local energy, people getting together and saying, hey, we got to work together to fix this. One of the reasons why I love living in Plumas County is it's a huge county with a small population. It's only about 20,000 people, but there's all sorts of nonprofit groups and co-ops and local government that's involved in how do we live better on this land? How do we take care of this beautiful gift of nature that we've been given so that our great-great-grandchildren will also have a decent life here? And that consciousness of community and working together is what's going to save us.
I couldn't agree more. And that's something I hope that this podcast helps promote, because the more we can promote the idea of collective thinking, I think the healthier society is going to see improvements overall. And touching back on the northern California, like West Canada innovations with growing, I want to ask you if you have anything that you would recommend to those folks from your world travels that maybe they haven't considered, that's maybe not a normal thing for North America in general to be doing.
Well, what I see is a lot of people thinking in terms of building their own community, getting a piece of land and coming together very selectively with the right group of people and saying, let's see how much we can feed ourselves, how we can have clean water, how we can generate our own energy. I'm lucky in that my hill faces south, so I get sun all day long. So I'll be able to get plenty of solar energy, and every afternoon, the weather, the warm warm weather in the Central Valley of California heats up and it comes up the Feather River Canyon and it hits my hill at 3,400 feet up. And every afternoon there's wind, so I'll be able to get wind energy as well. And that kind of thinking of like, how do we become native to a place in a way where we can build a community and control what happens to us as opposed to having forces from outside come in from far away saying, oh, let's exploit the resources of this area to get rich. If you look at the history of Plumas County and a lot of other counties in America and around the world, the copper of Zambia didn't make the people of Zambia wealthy. It made a bunch of corporations rich. The gold of South Africa, the gold of the mountains of the Sierras, it didn't make people in Plumas County. We have a poverty issue in Plumas County. The gold that was extracted and the timber that was extracted and the water that was extracted and the electricity from the hydropower, it made outside corporations and outside individuals rich. It didn't stay locally. So people are getting hip to the fact that, wait a minute, we need to control our local resources. I once said at a conference, do we get any money from the electricity revenue that PG&E gets from the dams on the Feather River? And all the businessmen said, no, we don't get it. All we get is a little bit of property tax. So there's a consciousness about if there's going to be money made from local resources, some of that money has to stay with local people, and local control and the local economy is going to become a much more important message. Because if you look at what happened to bookstores got wiped out by Amazon, and then Amazon spread from books into all sorts of products, and they're knocking out even, Bed Bath and Beyond and Toys R Us, some pretty big companies are getting knocked out by online purchasing. And it's not necessarily that, I'm not against the internet, of course, but people are realizing we got to protect these local businesses. There's some really good sociology comparing counties in America that have big box stores and counties that don't have big box stores. The counties that don't have big box stores have better graduation rates from school, better upward mobility, better home ownership, better voter participation, because their small business sector is protected from competition from Walmart and these big box stores. And that adds to a thriving local economy. So all of this kind of knowledge is percolating out into the population, and people realizing we need to foster local green economy, locally controlled, locally owned, and green, friendly to nature. And that is going to accelerate as time goes by.
So you would almost say that the global standards starting to become more realized around local economy.
Yeah, people are waking up that we can't keep going in a path that relies on big corporations and big governments to solve these problems. If you look at a massive solar array or massive wind towers, that means either big government or big corporations, because you need a lot of capital to do that. So people are moving toward smaller, local microgrids, getting together, sharing resources, putting solar panels on all the stores on Main Street and sharing the cost of it and benefiting from the results, because solar and wind are a lot cheaper than burning even natural gas. So when people start to look at the numbers and the profitability, they're starting to understand, wait, we can make this shift, but let's not rely on big companies to do it. Let's do it under local control.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point to bring up that I do feel like social media has helped with. I feel like that's one of the benefits to it has been the just educational aspect of, hey, look, my perspective's very similar to yours. Why don't we work together?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not just codependence when you want independence. It's searching for the truth in what is doing the most work, what is doing the most, what is providing the best solution, essentially, for the long term. because we all need to think more long term when it comes to especially first world development, because we tend to get in our zone with our things, with our consumerist values, and that blinds us to the fact that, hey, nature matters too. Hey, the dirt matters too. The air matters too. All these little things that are free, they matter. And in the long spectrum of it, the quality can diminish if we're not careful. So quality is good. We need to keep it there. We need to keep a standard.
Yep.
And on that, I actually have a question around technology, which is, what's the best eco-friendly technology finds? What's something that ended up being life-changing in your personal experience, either through yours or through someone else that you know?
Well, it's kind of funny because, I was an academic, a book writer, public speaking, PhD, all this kind of stuff. But my first 21 years were in a forest, an 18-acre forest in New Jersey, heavily wooded, with a river running right alongside it. And so I grew up with hand tools. And now since I've retired, I've gotten back into hand tools, and every day I'm using a Pulaski, a McLeod, a chainsaw, clippers, a machete. I just bought myself a new machete. And hand tools, people think, oh, high tech. You got to also think of low tech. Hand tools, you can do so much with hand tools, and you're getting exercise. If you look at the science of human physiology, how the body works, it turns out the data shows that the best form of exercise is what's called high-intensity interval training, HIIT. High-intensity interval training is where you go full bore for a short period. It can be a few minutes. I do like 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Work up a sweat, get the heart beating, and then get in the hammock, relax, and breathe, and look up at the trees, and meditate, and just focus on really deep breathing. It turns out the best form of breathing is about 5.5 seconds inhale, 5.5 seconds exhale. That's super deep and super slow. And what that does is it calms you. It lowers your blood pressure. It puts you in a relaxed state. And then after a few minutes of that rest, you go back at it and go really hard. And it turns out in the physiological studies, it turns out that's really good for your health and your longevity, living long and keeping your brain in shape and keeping your muscles in shape and keeping your heart functioning right. So I've really gotten into hand tools. And yes, I'll eventually do solar and wind. I'm actually working on a design for a new type of wind energy. And I think sometimes we get enamored by thinking, oh, technology is going to save us. No, human creativity and imagination and collaboration is what's going to save us. Technology doesn't operate outside of a social environment. You got to ask who owns the technology and who's using it to do what. PG&E, when they build a wind farm or solar panels, they're looking to make money. When I do something like that, I'm looking to preserve my property for my grandchildren and their children. So that's a different motivation. You got to look at the social factor of how's the technology being used, who's using it to do what to whom. And once you've solved that problem and you get the technology under local control, it can be a lot less harmful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And technology is temporary unless there's always a energy being exfoliated to provide technology, the wind, so to speak, to keep running.
Yeah.
So and that goes with the low tech and the high tech, because there is a difference. I mean, high tech operates at a high caliber. You need servers to run some of this machinery. You need different automations to run timing in some of the large scale factories. So, and I'm not saying homesteading necessarily has to do with anything like that, but it does have to do with gas, and it does have to do with different things that energize your tools that at the end of the day come from factories. They come from places that, again, are distributing these resources. That, I mean, there's a reason why farmers refer to oil as liquid gold. I mean, it's just true. Some of these things, when you get to larger scales, it matters how much you use. It matters how much waste there is. If you don't keep that stuff in mind, you're being foolish.
And something like a chainsaw, a great invention, traditionally it was run on gasoline. So you got a fire issue. When you stop cutting, that chainsaw is still sitting there, it's still burning gas and oil. Whereas the electric, now there's good, I have a nice electric chainsaw. It's got a battery. You recharge it. And after about an hour, when the battery runs down, you should be taking a rest anyway. I don't want to work more than an hour at a time. So, you know, there are some benefits to this new technology, and battery technology is going to increasingly get better. So another upward curve in terms of our advance toward a more sustainable lifestyle.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, this kind of brings us to our next point, which is, would you recommend someone starts with a team or starts solo on their green development projects? Like, is there a magic number you've noticed that people find the most success with? Like, I know with the chambers of commerce, that's a common one in each area. There's committees, and you know, committees have been known to be hit and miss on progress because there's a lot of people's input. There's a lot of individual filtering going on. So it can kind of hinder the process. So if someone's starting on, say, their private property, would you recommend them to try to collaborate on projects to begin and start their network early? Or do you recommend more of an individual, let's bunker down, make a 5-year plan, and then once we got steam rolling, let's start pushing our network?
Well, everybody's situation is going to be different, but having created a bunch of organizations myself, the Green Festivals, Global Exchange, it's really crucial to build a team. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens very gradually. The kind of people that you're going to connect to and get involved in any kind of project, no matter how big or small it is, it's key to be team building. Now, I'm lucky I grew up playing team sports, football, baseball, basketball, and it's all about team consciousness. I can remember coaches saying, Danaher, there's 10 other guys out on that field. You may be the quarterback, but you're one of 11 players, and you got to subordinate. They didn't say subordinate your ego, but you got to put your ego into that team consciousness. And those skills, those social skills, unfortunately, don't get taught explicitly in school. Kids have to be taught how. That's why I'm a big fan of team sports. You got to learn how to work with other people and put your ego in the background and say, okay, I'm going to check my ego at the door here, and we're going to figure out how we work together. And that's where division of labor comes out. Some people are really, I have a buddy who's really good at topping dead trees. He can climb up a tree and take that top off so that it makes it easier to take that tree down. And I'm not going to do that. I'm 72 years old. I'm not climbing up that tree. I like climbing trees, but I ain't going way up there with a chainsaw. So a lot of it is about what you're trying to do, what kind of land you're dealing with, and what your social networks are. And this is where social media comes in too, because Facebook and LinkedIn, I've got thousands of people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, and they're all like green professionals because of, the kind of work I've done and the kind of people I got connected to and that I want to work with. So it's easier than to tap into putting out a message and saying, hey, I'm doing such and such a project. Anybody got any ideas? And right away you get feedback of saying, oh, don't buy that chainsaw. There's a better one that you could get, tapping into that group wisdom. Group thinking is always going to be smarter than individual thinking. We can't, as individuals, know everything. And let's face it, we're social animals. We grew up and exist in a social network. And depending on who you're hanging out with, you're going to either get exposed to stupidity or really great thinking. So choosing the people that you deal with is a crucial element. Yeah, it's important to have good land and good tools, but if you're working with the wrong people, you're going to get frustrated. So figuring out who your team is and being careful about that selection process, that's really key.
No, I'd agree completely. The exposure that you have as an individual is always going to be, you're always going to be set at a disadvantage versus working at a group. That's why they do group experiments and group testing for products that they put on assembly lines, because they want that feedback from a group, not just their own individual conceptual basis. So, and that brings us to our next point, which is actually something to do with your background. Personally, when you were in San Francisco, you were on a large-scale development team. What would you think, what's your opinion? Did you learn more through the public service than any other role before? Or did it feel more like a literal job than a direct passion?
Well, two different things. One, I worked for the San Francisco Department of Environment, and it was really a pleasure. I was running the outreach team. I had 20 staff where we were in the schools. We were out doing public events. We had an electric cargo bike that would pull all of our tents and chairs and information, and we would go to these street events. There's all sorts of public events out on the street in San Francisco. So we were able to go out and educate people about, hey, you want to save money on energy? Here's some insulation you can put in your homes, and the city government will pay half of the cost. I did it on my own house. They covered about $5,000 worth of insulation on my house. So that public service, and the Department of Environment is really unique. In San Francisco city government, the Department of Environment has two nonprofit organizations within the Department of Environment. One is big companies coming together, Wells Fargo and Chevron and all these big companies. How can you green your operations? How can you be more environment friendly? And then another nonprofit within the Department of Environment focuses on helping small green companies redo their refrigerators so they use less energy, and put solar energy on the roof of their building and all things like that. So it was great in that when they would do these competitions of greenest city, San Francisco would always come out either number one or right near the top, because we had a huge department that was out there in the public helping the business community, helping the nonprofits, helping the schools understand, look, we can take charge of this stuff. We're not helpless victims of natural disasters. We can actually prevent a lot of this stuff. But another project that I was involved in, separate from city government, was an attempt to create a real estate model that would have a big building with ground floor retail that would house a lot of kiosks from local green companies all grouped up together. The second floor would be offices of those green companies. So if you want to meet the CEO, she's right upstairs. We'll have her come down and talk to you. And then up above that, homes, apartments for the workers who work in that building. Because the cheapest and greenest commute is to go downstairs to work. And now with a lot of people, like half the people who used to work in offices now are working from home, and a lot of these office buildings are unoccupied, and there's a huge amount of building space, these big office buildings that are empty, and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. So a composite model like that brings together several different community functions in the same building. The problem for me was I had a backer, a financial backer, who provided me with $1 million, which sounds like a lot of money. But in San Francisco real estate, I'm competing with guys who have 30 million or 80 million or 112 million. And they'd look at me like, who are you? What are you doing here? You only got $1 million to play in this poker game? Get out of here. So I wasn't able, there were 7 different buildings I tried to get control of, and I just didn't didn't have enough money. But I learned from that. And, it's like you don't sit down in a poker game where the ante is $100 and you got a few coins in your pocket. You're not going to get a seat in that poker game. So I learned a lot about real estate development in that process, because prior to that, I had only done small properties, individual homes, buying them, fixing them up, and selling them. And when you're dealing with big office buildings in a rich city like San Francisco, it's a totally different poker game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the scale there is massive, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the competition for those building spaces, because space is a luxury in a place so urbanized. So
yeah.
you really have to confine what you're looking for and the space that is going to be used for certain projects. I know in the past I've visited different sites there, and there's a lot of hybrid environments, a lot of multiple things going on. And, in essence, that's where I feel like San Francisco has some pros. There is a sense of community there that is unlike other cities. It does have its problems. It does have a homeless problem, of course. When you have an environment that's so extreme, you're gonna have, unfortunately, people that can't keep up with such an extreme environment. It's turned into something competitive where it's not necessarily meant to be competitive. But that's human nature, that's you can't expect everyone to play fair. Not everyone wants to play in the sand pit together. But since that's an experience that you learned from and you educated through that, what's something, since you have background with education as an educator yourself, would you recommend college to the everyday person struggling with the bills? Like, would you consider volunteering and woofing also as a welcomed alternative for anyone struggling in the classroom environment?
Yeah, the woofers, the World Organic Farm system is amazing. It's all over the planet. It's in dozens of countries where you can go, and it's semi-volunteer. You're going to get fed, and you're going to get housed, and you're going to work on an organic farm wherever. They're all over the place. It's a great experience. I have a buddy who's got a farm where he's had a lot of woofers, and I've interviewed them. They love it. It's life transforming. It's really important. And that's just one of many, many ways in which people can go to other parts of the world. At Global Exchange, we do reality tours where we take people out to other countries and meet real people and see how they're doing local development and try and learn from them and share and develop a sense of community on a planetary level. We are all brothers and sisters, after all, in a spiritual sense. So I highly recommend woofing, and it's part of a larger movement of people waking up to the fact that we've got a global situation of climate chaos. It's happening all over the world. There were millions of people that lost their homes in Pakistan during the floods in Pakistan, just totally torrential, crazy rainfall that went for months and just wiped out whole sections of the country. Hurricanes in Florida, floods in California, rivers going dry in Europe. All sorts of, it's like Mother Nature giving us dope slaps, and it's causing people to wake up. In terms of college, if people can afford it, I mean, I did 12 years of college to get the PhD. It took a long time, but it was great because the California system at the time, my first 2 years of college, I paid $21 a year of tuition. And my bachelor's degree, it was a few $100 a year. The PhD was about $1,000 a year. So I ended up with about $10,000 worth of debt at the end of the PhD, and I was able to pay that off pretty quick.
Well,
so,
and what years were those?
This was 1970 from let's see, 76. Well, no, it was more like from 72 to 84, about 12 years.
Okay. No, that just gives people a sense of how financial things were then.
Yeah, well, but it was because the state government was providing subsidies, right? The state college system, it was all through Sonoma State was my bachelor's degree in University of California at Santa Cruz. These are California state institutions where the state government can tax the rich people and say, okay, we're going to help these poor kids with cheap tuition or free tuition. So I had scholarships and, all sorts of loans and, really cheap loans that didn't have a high interest rate. If we provide those so that anybody can get a college education if they have the willpower to put in the work, and you got to do the work. I had to read so many books in order to get those degrees. It wasn't easy, right? It was a lot of hard work. But if you provided assistance and you got work study, I was working in the library. It's right there on campus, easy to get there, free apartment on campus. Those kinds of things make it possible. So we need policies at a national level, not just a state level, because then you're going to get very uneven development. We need federal assistance to students so that if they have the smarts and the willpower, they'll be able to afford it. That's the key thing, being able to afford it.
Sure. No, sure. The more accessible education is, the more people will try to utilize it, correct?
Sure. Yep.
I just want to add, what's something you would recommend? Any tips for the struggling students?
Well, you got to persevere. You got to hang in there. Don't let your own worst enemy is in your own brain. That voice that says, "Oh man, this is too hard. I can't do this." If that were the attitude of everybody in the world, we would have sunk into disaster a long time ago. The species would have ended. Think about our ancestors. They grew up on farms where they had to grow their own food or go hungry. They dealt with natural disasters and world wars and things that we can barely conceive of. And they didn't give up. They hung in there and they persevered and they came out the other side. If you think of your own personal existence, you go back hundreds of generations. If any one of those couples had not fallen in love and made a baby, you wouldn't exist anywhere along that line of your ancestors. One little screwed up love affair that didn't happen, you wouldn't exist. So let's pay respect to them, but also think about how we, our ancestors, future generations, are going to depend on what we do now. Are we going to hand over a burnt cinder of a planet to future generations? Oh, sorry, we used up all the resources. Here you go. Here's a screwed up planet. Or are we going to wake up and feel some responsibility to those future generations?
Sure.
So that consciousness of how do we become good ancestors, that is spreading around the world and people are waking up.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a reasonable assumption. I'd say to gather now. And social media has created a sense of accountability on the individual's perspective. They want to do better because they want to be presentable. So, and, I think something people generally, I'd agree, can work on is grit, hanging in there. I mean, mental health has become more prominent, and I think that's a really great thing to see. People speaking up about how they feel, how their balance is. I mean, these are all things that we need to be honest with ourselves about when undertaking more responsibility, especially on the social scale.
Yeah.
So with that, is there anything as an author you would like to recommend people trying to get into green energy, green technology, and living?
Well, not to be too self-promoting, but some colleagues and I did a book a few years back called Building the Green Economy, Success Stories from the Grassroots. And in Building the Green Economy, what we did was we went around and we looked at specific policies, specific programs where people wanted to get rid of a toxic waste dump. They got organized. They pressured local government and corporations They got rid of it. People wanted to put windmills on Native American reservations. They got together, they got organized, they did it. The key issue is the organizational issue. If you don't have some kind of a team, if you don't have some kind of an organization, you're on your own. And on your own, there's a limit to what you can do. Yeah, I can dig some swales and chop down some trees, but eventually I'm going to have other people living on that property, and that amplifies our ability to manage that property. So there's plenty of examples. The literature is just huge. I got piles of books on my floor, not only about green technology, but brain science. We're learning that by having good relationships with other people and working closely with people you enjoy being with, it improves your health. Generosity of spirit, being a giving kind of person and a helping kind of person, is in your self-interest. Your body chemistry improves when you're nice. It's something our mothers taught us when we were 2 years old. You know, don't fight, play nice, share your toys, don't fight. You know, these are really simple messages, and we're starting to prove now with very good scientific data that physically we improve our own health by the way we treat others. If you look, my book, Building the Green Economy, has a section where we look at all the different religious traditions on the planet, and every one of them has some version of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Well, now we're learning to unpack that word others to mean not just other humans, but all species. How do we love all the children of all species for all time? If the sea turtles were doing to us if the sea turtles were doing to us what we're doing to the sea turtles, there'd be sea turtles walking down the street slapping the hell out of us because we're wiping out sea turtles by the fishing industry using fine mesh nets that catch the sea turtles. It's an air breather. It has to get to the surface. You're drowning an animal that has been swimming the ocean for about 70 million years. They survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, and we're wiping them out because these fishing companies don't want to spend $400 on what's called a turtle excluder device. It's a grill that catches the sea turtle and kicks it out a side door, but it lets the shrimp and other things through. But they don't want to spend that money on those turtle excluder devices. And
Sure.
They go to the World Trade Organization and fight against U.S. laws like the Marine Mammal Preservation Act and the Endangered Species Act that say, look, you're not going to be able to sell your product in the U.S. if you keep killing these animals. They go to the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization rules on the side of corporate profits instead of preserving the animals. Most people don't know what the World Trade Organization is. It's writing a constitution for the entire planet that will overrule local laws that try to protect the environment in favor of laws that promote corporate profit making. That's deadly. And we got to change that. And that's why we do protests and we try and educate people about these big institutions like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, where the only people at the table are big corporate lawyers working to enhance the profits of corporations.
Sure.
That's deadly. So the key question is, how does capital get invested? And who's sitting at the table? Is it diverse? Are there farmers and housewives and other people at the table, or is it just corporate types? And what is the goal? Is it to maximize the profits of corporations, or is it to enhance the living standards of us? Is it about keep the environment safe, keep the water safe to drink, the air clean to breathe? Over 90% of the world's people are breathing polluted air, over 90%. That's just unacceptable. We got to change that. There's millions of people die every year from lung diseases that's caused by pollution. And that pollution is created by these big corporations who make money by not cleaning up their act. So there's increasingly a movement to force them to operate more responsibly.
And this is stuff you touch on in your book, huh?
Yeah, I've written 13 books and counting, pointing out, look, we can change this. Everywhere in the world, there's people fighting to change it.
Well, on that note, is there someone, someone that's looking into learning more about Kevin Danaher? Is there a book for that you would recommend?
Well, I wrote a book way back called 10 Reasons to Abolish the IMF and the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And what I do in that book, I use the documents of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to say, what's wrong with this system of capitalism? You will not hear people on commercial TV use the word capitalism, right? That's the name of our economy. It's not free enterprise. That's ideology, right? The question is, free enterprise, what does it mean? Does it mean freedom for big corporations to go anywhere on the planet and do whatever they want to people and nature? Or does it mean the freedom of everyone to be enterprising? To be enterprising, you need capital, access to capital. Well, you go to the bank and say, hey, I need some money. Well, who are you? Do you have a lot? No, I don't have a lot of money. Oh, well, then go away. We don't want to deal with you because we can't make money off of you. Until we change the basic rules of capitalism, where it's not just about making money. And what you see going on is a whole movement within the corporate community, within the banking community, people realizing, hey, we're destroying the planet. We got to fix things. So now you're getting large companies and investment firms saying we have to consider environment, social impact, and the governance of the company. You'll see it as ESG, environment, social, governance, where they're saying, look, we're going to judge investing in your company. If you're harming the environment, we're not going to invest in you. If you're hurting people, if you're not treating your workers right, we're not going to invest in you. And if your governance doesn't include diversity in your decision making, we're not going to invest in you. And capital is moving in a more responsible direction, just like it's moving toward green technology. So we need to accelerate that movement because time is limited. We need to make these changes really fast because there are some tipping points coming with Antarctica melting, Greenland melting, ocean levels rising. Half the world's population lives along coasts, massive populations. If you look at China, their population is mostly along the east coast of the country. So these issues are going to be accelerated in importance as time goes by, and more people are going to wake up. Mother Nature's dope slaps are going to wake up more people, and things are going to change.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with the greenhouse gases, the emissions, I think that's definitely something with Greenland I worry about personally.
Yeah, the permaculture up north in the Arctic Circle, the permaculture is melting. It's held carbon for millions of years, and we're releasing it through the melting of that permaculture. Roads are falling. You have what are called drunk forests, where the trees are tipping over because they were based on permaculture that's now melting and going soft. And also that permaculture has viruses and bacteria that haven't exposed for millions of years.
Yeah, so there's a biological problem that
serious problems.
And that's something people need to consider. Before I lose track here, Kevin, I want to make sure that there's not any websites you'd recommend to people either that you might want them to know if you're well, since you are an author, is there anywhere that you could link them to?
Well, the Global Exchange website is a really good website where people can see all the different kinds of work we're doing with fair trade, with U.S. relations with Mexico, with reality tours, taking people. We take large groups every year to Cuba. And a lot of Americans don't realize the U.S. government has policies to try and destroy the Cuban economy. It's only 11 million people. It's a tiny country, 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and we've been bullying them for 60 years now. Just leave them alone. They're no threat to us. They've never attacked us. They have no animosity towards us. They just want to be left alone. And they've actually done some things. It's the only country I know of that the entire country went to organic agriculture. When the Soviet Union collapsed and they couldn't get cheap petrochemicals anymore, they went organic as a nation. They went to bicycles to cut down on car traffic. So there's things we can learn from these people. Like in Cuba, there's a clinic, a free medical clinic in every neighborhood, and the nurse and the doctor live in the apartments above the clinic. So they know all of their clients because they live right there in the neighborhood. Well, we could do that. It saves money. It's not only better for health, public health, it saves money. So there's a lot to be learned from other people around the world, but we have to connect with them. And luckily with the internet, we have the potential for global brain. Everybody can connect with everybody else. If you look at the history of communication, first it was person to person, one to one. Then with radio and TV, it was one to many. But now it's many to many. So you can have all of these connections, and we're seeing it with the proliferation of all these social media. That creates the possibility of creating a global family where we get rid of nationalism and religious fundamentalism and all this crazy tribalistic kind of thinking. If we're going to solve these global problems, we're going to do it by thinking of each person on the planet as a brother and a sister, a cousin, because ultimately we're all related. You go back, we're all from Africa, actually. We can all trace our origins if you go back far enough to Africa. So the worst suffering on the planet and the greatest potential for development happens to be in Africa, where the entire human race originated. So we're starting to learn these things and incorporate it into our behavior. And that's why I'm very hopeful, because the human brain is possible, does have potential for expanding its consciousness and solving the problems that we're dealing with.
Sure. And I think the localization, especially of health clinics, is something I vouched for. As someone who wanted to go into the medical field, I quickly realized a lot of it has to do with money. I mean, and it's saturated with the feeling that it's artificial. And if we could shake that feeling more and look towards more herbal medication, more homesteaded remedies, homesteaded recommendations, even give them something to do on their own time where they're helping themselves benefit. I think that could do wonders. The problem is, how do you make money off of education at that form? You're telling them to essentially get away from the system. But if we don't have a healthy populace, no one wins. Ultimately, we need a healthy populace, and that's something we all need to stand up for ourselves. I believe we really need to push towards understanding what's being fed to us, what's in our food, what's getting into the soil. All those things matter in the long run, because they matter for the local cattle too. If the cattle's eating something and you eat that cattle, you best bet it's going to be in your system.
Yeah, and now with the internet, we have the ability to easily research, and artificial intelligence is going to increase this too, where you type in a question. I was on ChatGPT and I typed in a question: why does global capitalism create more inequality? And whew, there's like 5 paragraphs printed out.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The exposure that's going to cause. But the flip side is the false news. You know, people could use this just as it's a tool for good. It could be a tool for bad. So it's important for us to do individual research and follow up on that, because bias in our news is going to be something we all have to live with. And I mean, it's been something for years. There's always been bias. You look at ancient history and the Hellenic periods and antiquity. I mean, even further back than that. I mean, human history, really, as we know it, there's always been a bias. And it's something historians argue about constantly. So, it's really about your perspective at the end of the day on what you can control. And that's the reason I personally believe in Stoic values through Stoicism. The philosophy of Stoicism is a simple one, really. It's you only control what you can control. There's certain values in life. You don't know what's going on at your friend's house if you're standing in your own house. You only know what's going on in your house. So why would you worry about necessarily everyone else's house if right now you can only control what's in your house, what's in your environment? That doesn't mean you can't expose yourself to that environment, but it does mean that you have to take into consideration pacing yourself. I think with especially homesteading and improving your life values, that's so important, and it's so vital to keeping yourself going.
Yeah.
As we come to a close here, I have one more big follow-up question, and then something fun. So ultimately, what do you see that society should look into? Like, what's something that they could follow up on more from your experience? This could be something like anti-pollution measures, preservation of agriculture life.
Well, I think as an American, as somebody who grew up here in the United States, it's clear to me that one of the biggest problems we have is hyper-individualism. We've been taught, it's all about you as an individual, and all, the great man theory and the self-made man and the hero and, Matt Dillon, Gunsmoke, he shoots a guy at the beginning of every show. And it's all about this individualism and, it's up to you to solve the climate crisis by reducing your car usage. And it's all about the individual. Well, we are social beings. We exist in relationship to other human beings. The data on longevity, how long people live and how healthy they are, one of the key factors in addition to nutrition and exercise is what's your social network? Do you have a lot of relationships with people that are positive and reinforce a positive attitude you have about your life? So that hyper-individualism is promoted by the corporations who want to sell us all sorts of crap we don't need. That's their goal, right? Oh, you really need this. If you look at advertising, it's all about either this product will make you happy or this product will keep danger away. Oh, you need security on your home.
They rely on your broken mindset. They want you to be in a state of instability.
Right. They want you feeling fragmented and needing stuff, where really happiness comes from relationships with other living things. And that's proven not just with humans, but with dogs and cats and animals, relationships with trees. Tree hugging was used as an epithet against the environmental movement. Well, it turns out hugging a tree is good for you. So the science is building up now, and it's harder and harder for people to deny that we need to move toward not a thing-based society, but a person-based, human-based, loving-based society. And that's what all the great spiritual leaders were teaching us, to treat everyone else as a brother and a sister. That recognition will drive us in a direction of keeping the planet healthy and survivable for future generations. So that's what gives me hope, is activism. Hope isn't just sitting around thinking that things are going to work out. It's getting out there and working to make the world a better place, to be an intellectual activist where, yes, you're thinking and analyzing, but you're also out there doing and changing things. And that's what's going to save us.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with all those points. I think... Oh, and that's part of the reason, bringing it back to Stoicism, that I value it, because it's not just about the individual as much as people may view it from the outside. It's really about personal growth to be able to expand out into those local duties, to be able to be part of your community effectively, though, not just meandering, not just stalling yourself. The whole basis of it is, how can I be an effective member of life? How can I fit myself in and integrate my daily life with these values that I want to incorporate, that I want to improve on? How do I improve my living standard? You improve your living standard by taking the reins and taking flight. You can't stay stable. You can't just stay in the same mindset your whole life. You have to change. You have to adapt. You have to open up.
The only difference between a rut and a grave is the length. So you got to get out of your rut.
I've never heard that one before. I like that. That's creative. Well, we have one question for you to finish this off. What's your favorite memory of a time you went to a convention or experienced fellowship with other like-minded individuals?
Well, I was really lucky in the fact that at the age of 19 in 1969, my girlfriend at the time, Mary Lee, she bought me tickets to an event called Woodstock. It was a music and arts festival. And we thought it was going to be like, a concert, whatever. And luckily, we went a day ahead of time in my little Chevy Nova wagon. We got up there before the crowds, and we drove down into a field, and it was August, so they had already baled up the hay, and we took hay bales, and we made 3 walls with the car being the 4th wall, and we put branches and stuff across the top for a roof, and we made ourselves a nice little house out in the middle of a field, and it ended up being this historic event with 500,000 people. And when you're around that many people, and there's no police with guns, and there's no fighting, and yeah, there's issues of, is there enough food, are there enough porta potties, whatever. We solved those problems through collective action, through hugging and saying, okay, it's raining, we need some tarp to get under and stay dry. Whatever the issue was, we dealt with it, and we dealt with it with good humor and a good vibe. And, there were guys going through the crowd with big plastic garbage bags full of joints of marijuana that they were throwing handfuls out into the crowd. And, if somebody opened a candy bar, they'd take a bite and share it with everybody around them. There was a lot of communal sharing going on. And it changes your chemistry in your body. You start to feel elevated, like high, not on any drugs, but just on the camaraderie and the social connectedness of it. And that actually laid the basis for me participating in a lot of mass demonstrations. When we shut down the World Trade Organization meetings in Seattle in late 1999, we had over 50,000 people out in the street in between the convention center and the hotels where the delegates were staying. And we non-violently, we didn't hurt anybody, we non-violently shut down that conference. After 4 days of meetings, they didn't even have a press release. They were planning on setting up whole rules for the global economy, favoring corporate profits against people and nature. And it didn't happen because we put so many people out in the street. So on any given policy issue, you can ask yourself the question, if we could put a few thousand people outside the building where those decisions get made, could we non-violently influence the decision-making? Of course you could, that's right. But it's about mobilizing people, and that's about educating them. At Global Exchange, we always focused on education for mobilization. It's not education for you to be a pundit and sound smart at the local bar and be all cute and, have trivia questions and stuff like that. It's about how do we build a better world with less suffering and more justice. And that'll come about. It's just a question, how long is it going to take and how much suffering happens in the meantime? How many people have to die before we get our act together? And I'm confident that eventually humans are going to get their act together and fix all these problems.
Yeah, and the more we can work on making education more active, in an active form, it's going to benefit us all. I mean,
it in the education system, project-based learning, where students are out actually doing stuff and applying the knowledge to the real world. That's a better form of learning than just sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's a great note to leave it on. I think this is going to really help people understand more about valuing their neighbors, valuing their community, because this is something we need. This is something we need to change and make a more precedent or a common denominator in conversations, especially moving away from the harsh political comments. People like to do that, and it's unfortunate to see, because we all breathe, we all have blood, we all share skin. We need to just accept that we need to help each other. We need to look past our differences and look at the big picture, which is the kids, which is the future generation, which is nature. These things that define our existence on this planet, that make Earth such a beautiful place to live in. So I think I agree with you. I think we'll get there eventually. People need to just wisen up before things get worse. I mean, the sheer fact of the matter is people die because of people's ignorance. So the less ignorance that we have, the more chance there is for people to have a chance.
Mother Nature's the home team, where she's gonna slap us upside the head in various ways, and we're gradually learning that we got to take care of our planet, or we're gonna pay a heavy price.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, Kevin. And I hope you've enjoyed your time here. I know I have. I've learned a lot from this, and I really hope to collaborate and have you on again.
Okay, let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you guys being here today. We've been able to get a couple people lined up for some future podcasts, so we will definitely be publishing them. I will be having Kevin on again at some point. We will be getting into more specific talks around more green economy, because he's very education or very versed around the education involved with these subjects, and I think we could definitely have more discussions around this. This could last for hours. I mean, it's a very heavy and active community right now, and it should be. It should be. So I just want to leave you guys with a great note and say thank you for coming. And I really look forward to future projects with people. And on that note, this has been the World Networking Podcast, and I hope you've tuned in and enjoyed yourself. And we will be discussing in the future. And have a great day, everyone.